Hello friends, I'm David Vos. Today is December the 9th, 2016. It's great to see everybody today. Well, today I want to come to you guys with some information about astrology. Now, I know I have a lot of people that watch these videos that are Christians, and some of you don't like what I'm teaching at all. And you're under the opinion that everything I'm saying is just completely wrong, that I mentioned the word occult in the last video, because occult seems to go hand in hand, the word, with astrology, and then people think of the word witch, the sorcerer, and so I'm a witch and I'm teaching the occult. Well, what I'm trying to say, friends, I don't want to shock people, is that we've been duped, and the people who were killed throughout the Dark Ages were not Christians. Okay? They were true followers of Christ, but they were not Christians. The church has labeled them witches, but I've been trying to explain that that word doesn't... We've made that word up over the last 2,000 years. It's just something that we come up with. They called them diviners. That we can cop to, because Daniel was a diviner, and Joseph was a diviner, and the apostles were diviners. We've gone into that a lot in some of my other videos. The word occult just means hidden, and it was hidden because it had to go underground and be hidden, because they murdered anyone who taught these things. So if you were teaching the mysteries that Jesus was teaching, remember, you said, well, the mysteries... Hey, we're Christians. We don't teach you mysteries. Well, if you remember, the Apostle Paul says that the Bible, the Old Testament, was written in symbols and it's mysteries. And he knew the mysteries. And he was teaching the mysteries. He says, notice my knowledge of the mysteries. And he says, it means Christ in the church, and this is the real meaning. It's not about some Jacob with 12 sons or something. The whole thing's an analogy. Types and shadows. And see, we get lost because we hear about the people who died during the Dark Ages. They were the bad people, the witches, right? No, they were the true Christians, the true followers of Christ, and they were occult. They had to go underground, and they taught. We dug up some of their manuscripts called the Nag Hammadi Library. Wow, we found out the scholars are saying these are the real Gospels. But Christians have not yet been allowed to accept this. No, wait a minute, Dave. No, that just don't exist. They were written before the four Gospels that we have that's in our Bibles. So there were several Gospels. All we ever came down to us was the Gospels that the Catholic Church, after reviewing, allowed us to have. But many of the more precious and precise, beautiful sayings of Christ, we were not allowed to keep. The Gnostics had those, and they would compile them into books, canons. The Catholic Church came up with a canon of accepted verses and scriptures that we were allowed to look at and believe. But that was their version. Then the Protestants came along and said, wait a minute now, there's just too many. So they threw out the Apocrypha. Okay, the first King James Bible had the Apocrypha. But guess what? The first Bible, the first canon, had more than the Apocrypha. I know, it sounds amazing, but go back in history and read Eusebius and Origen and some of the ancient church fathers, and you'll see that Marcion had a canon of Scripture that included other verses and scriptures that we don't have. So it's just a canon, a biblical group of books. So now remember, give me some time, because I'm going to go through a lot of information in this, and I know, I must confess, I spend a lot of time apologizing for what I'm telling you. They call them the apologists, right? Because we're being accused of being the bad guys, the occult. I follow the scriptures. You follow the scriptures. You think you're good, and I think I'm good. The only difference is I think you're good too. It's just that there is a lot of information that Christians are not allowed to read. They're not allowed to see. And they've been told that these guys are witches and they got warts on their nose. And they fly around in brooms and they're bad and they cast spells on people. And none of that ever happened. The Catholic Church accused them of that and murdered many of them, millions of them. But they weren't bad, and they didn't worship the devil. In fact, they didn't believe in a devil. They believed in astrology, the esoteric wisdom. And what I'm going to show you today is that without this knowledge of the esoteric wisdom, the ancient esoteric mysteries that Paul said he knew and understood, you're not going to understand the Bible. Because you see, the Apostle Paul and the Apostle Peter said that these things were allegories, written for us upon whom the ends of the system of things should be down to. They were written as, what I was going to get into is that the group called the Gnostics, they had writings and teachings, just like today Protestants have teachings and writings. One of the things that everybody talks about is they have this, because most Christians have never even read the early true Christians' writings. The Gnostics, the Cathars, those were the ones that were murdered by the millions, the Waldensians and Albigensians, the Bogomiles, the Paulicians. These were the Christians that were murdered that were called witches. And one of the biggest things that they talk about is that Jehovah was the false god. See, so Christians say, oh, see, that's why we don't believe in those crazy people, or demonic, evil, wicked people, because they taught that the Old Testament God was the devil, so they got to be wrong. I've showed in many of my videos that they're right. I've showed conclusive proof that Jesus said that the Jewish God was the devil. And I'm not going to go back and rehash all of that right now. You'll have to go back and look at some other videos if you're new to this channel. But some of it will come out as we go here. But one of the things we think of, though, besides that, most people don't even realize that, I don't think. But the immediate thing comes to mind is, well, they taught about the Archons and the demiurges and all of that. That's not in the Bible. Well, I was explaining to you in another video that in our New Testament, it's translated into English. So Archons is translated principality. So Paul says that Jesus conquered the principalities and the dominions and the lords and thrones. And these words are just translated to English. So who are these Archons? These gods, these demiurges. Who is Jehovah? Who is the Elohim? Who are these characters in the Bible? Well, friends, in 2 Kings chapter 1, verse, the first 2-3 little verses in there, it says that they went to go consult the god Beelzebub. And most Christians are like, oh, Beelzebub, that's the god of the flies, that's the devil. Could be. All of these deities, archons, were conquered by Christ when he went down into this physical world and took on all these, took upon himself the flesh. And he had to overcome all of these carnal natures, these archetypes. And he conquered all the principalities, powers, and dominions. But you see, this is the same thing with Jehovah. Because Beelzebub was the god of Ekron. And the prophet told Elijah, okay, is there no God in Israel? See, Israel has its own God. You go consult Jehovah. You don't be going down there to the god of Ekron. And you say, well, there's a false god. That's why. Friends, Deuteronomy 32 says that all the nations had appointed over them a god. That's in the Septuagint version. And you can read about that and see that that's the original meaning of that verse. So there were 70 gods appointed over the nations, and Jehovah's portion was Israel. When Jacob went down to Egypt, it says he had 12 sons. But when he went down to Egypt, it says that 70 souls came out of his loins. Jesus picked 12 disciples, or 12 apostles, and then 70 others, and sent them forth. 70 is an important number. And but it's not some arbitrary, the nations that have nothing to do with Israel. No, they came out of the loins of Israel, the 70, and they're the nations. So you see, Abraham's the father of all nations. There were the 70 is mentioned throughout the Bible, And it's in astrology. It's in this astrological chart. And if you don't know this, what astrology is, you're not going to understand what the 12 are. The 12 are the signs of the zodiac. And the 70 are all the other names, the holy names of God. Wait a minute now. There's only one God. You got all these different names. He's Elohim. He's plural. And if you don't understand, you see the pantheon, Zeus, and Kronos had 12 sons, right? Jacob had 12 sons. Well, the Canaanites and the Hebrews all worshipped a god, the father of the gods, called El. Who is that? It seems to be this great puzzle in the minds of all of the even astrologers today, because you have to understand astrology. A lot of people say, I believe in astrology, and they're teaching it, but they don't know what even astrology is. I teach astrology, the occult, the esoteric wisdom, and I will testify to you now that almost anyone that you know that's teaching astrology is teaching it wrong. First of all, they try to put a different planet in to rule over each one of the signs when there's only 7 and there's 12 signs. And the original chart had one of the planets ruling over 2 different signs. So they're just making it up as they go. It's been lost. There's an apostasy in the earth. And so even the astrologers and the New Agers are running around talking about twin flames, and they don't know that it has to do with the spiritual and the physical and not your soulmate. So there's a lot that's been lost. People running around saying, I'm going to go and learn the esoteric wisdom of the East. And they get involved in yoga. Yoga was invented in 1930. If you sit in a yoga position and try to blank out your mind, you're going to just get arthritis and mental illness. That's not going to help you, because you see, you don't want to blank out your mind. You want to concentrate on the symbols and contemplate. You don't want to go blank. Meditation is good if you understand it's contemplation on ancient truth. Okay? It's not the blanking out of mind and reaching a place of nothingness. That's not what we want. What we want is everything. We want blessings, bliss, the blessings. And so, all the stuff you've heard, whether it be Christianity, it's apostate. They don't know what they're talking about. The occult, it's been apostate for years. They don't know what they're talking about. You can read Hermetic teachers 500 years ago that knew a lot more than we know now. But today, people are like, oh, well, they don't know what they're talking about, so we're going to change it a little bit. We know better now. No. They knew more about it 500 years ago, or 1,000 years ago especially. And in the days of Christ, before Christ, Socrates, Plato, all of these ancient philosophers, they call them today, they knew a lot. They went down. Pythagoras got his teachings from Solon, who went down to Egypt. It was a priesthood. And they made these little outcroppings of these esoteric groups, these communal orders. And the Essenes are one of them. The Essenes, a lot of people don't know what that word means. You see, Jesus, people say, well, Jesus was, his name was Jesus, and it's really a Hebrew word, Yeshua. That's not true. Jesus is I-E-S. Is. That's his name. And that's the name that you'll find written on the sun. The Son of God. I with an H in Greek, which is E-S. Eis. And that's his name. And so the Essenes are the followers of Jesus, just like Jesus the Nazarene. So one of the ways they called it was the Nazarenes. They had other names, the poor, Ebionites. And in different cities they were more known by one name or the other. But in Jerusalem they were called the poor. So these were these esoteric societies that got their wisdom from the wisdom of Egypt. It says Moses learned all the ways of the Egyptians, all the wisdom of the Egyptians. Solomon had all the wisdom of the Egyptians. And now we're finding out that Solomon was really a pharaoh. and Abraham was a pharaoh, and I did a video on that. But what is the Bible? The 12 sons of Jacob, obviously it has to do with the zodiac, because in the book of Revelation it gives you the woman crowned with the 12 stars as a sign in heaven, an astrological sign. I mean, at first a Christian is not going to accept that, but if you were to literally listen to this video and the ones that we're going to be doing in a series now from this video forward, I'm going to prove conclusively that the Bible is just about astrology. That the story of Jacob and his 12 children going down into Egypt is the story of the planets and the sun and the rotations in the great year of 24,000 years. There are three things you have to know in astrology. There are three great time scales that are connected together. The first one is the day, which has 24 hours. Or 12 hours in a day, excuse me. They changed it with the modern calendar to 24 hours, but it always had originally 12 hours. And then the second one is the year, which is the 12 months. So you get 12 hours, you get 12 months. The third one is the great astrological months. And those are the astrological signs. It takes 24,000 years, 25,000 years, depending on, it's actually about 25,000 years, but some say that it's more like 24,000, because in India they use the figure 24,000. And some say that what happens is it starts to speed up when it gets to a certain area as it goes around the elliptical. And it instead of actually being 25,000, it may actually be 24,000. But that's not important right now. What's important is that the great year of 25,000 years, and that's spoken of in the Bible in Daniel chapter 7. So these Archons that we talked about, that are translated principalities in the New Testament, what are the Archons? What does that word mean? Well, the sun makes an arc. And so those deities that are in that arc are the Archons. And they are gods, or they rule. And they're also, if you remember, the Bible says they're archetypes. Not real gods. Although they are, because the whole universe is conscious. And they do rule over us. But they are not men with beards having sexual relationships with humans. These are the Archons, or the archetypes, because they're only types and shadows. The Bible explains this. And today, people get very confused, trying to integrate early Christianity, now we call Gnosticism, and then later Christianity, which wasn't even called Christianity, because by that time the Catholic Church had banned it and called them witches, and they're called esoteric people. Like they're Sir Isaac Newton studied the Kabbalah and the Emerald Tablets, and translated the Emerald Tablets, in fact. Like I've said in many of my videos, Sir Isaac Newton wrote more about esoteric wisdom than he did about science. And just look how much he knew about science. Now, how do you think he knew all of this information? These amazing revelations he had, that today Newtonian physics is the most accurate way to understand the universe that we've ever known, and is still as accurate today as it was then. How did he understand this? Where did he get this wisdom? Who were these people that said, hey, the earth is round, when the Catholic Church was saying, no, it's flat? Why did they put them to death? Because Sir Isaac Newton and Copernicus and Ptolemy and all of these people were very wise. How did they get wise? How did they get this information? Because they studied the great science of Thoth. They read the book of Thoth, which is, as we said in the prior video, astrology. And it's come down to us in all of these things called tarot, or the deck of cards, other games with dice and dominoes and different things, and it's checkers. All of these games are remnants of the ancient thing called Urim and Thummim that the Hebrews used to divine an answer from God, from the gods. He said, well, the Old Testament only believes in one God, Dave. What are you talking? Elohim is plural. And he says, let us make man in our image. In Psalms 82, he says, that God is the most high among the gods, and he sits in the assembly of the divine beings. You go, well, I don't believe that part of the Bible. Jesus said, he verified it. You believe in Jesus? He says, if they called them gods, why do you stone me for saying I'm a god? Do you ever really stop and open your eyes just enough to allow that to enter into your mind and sink in and meditate on it? Because that's what meditation is. Just think about it. Oh, I don't want any thinking about anything. It might be the devil. See? You're going to miss out because you won't think for yourself. But these archons are archetypes. And it's an astrological chart. And through the chart and the types, shadows. Why do you think it's in the old times they called them shadows and types? On the backside of the moon, sometimes you just see a sliver of the moon because the sun is shining on this side, but not on this side, and then leaves a shadow. So these planets have shadows and turnings. And it says in the Bible that our Father in heaven, there is no shadow of turning with him. What does that mean? It means he's the central sun. What? Yeah, the Bible says that our Father is the sun. But you see, our sun can't be our Father in heaven because our sun is not the central sun to the whole universe. So our sun by the Greeks was called Helios. That's where we get the word halo, You ever seen a picture of Jesus with the sun behind his head? The halo, the Helios. Jesus was Helios. it's I-E-S. It looks like an H in Greek. Is. That's Jesus, is. The sun. And Helios in Greek is also Sol. O-L. O, Sol. Helos. Elo. El. El is the God, the father of these gods. But he's not the father of all. Because beyond the sun, the creator of the sun, the creator of Chronos, there's a creator of chronology. There is a creator of El. El has a father. And that is Anu. Anu means heaven. And this is why, see, there's only 7 visible planets, including the sun and the moon and the earth. But they couldn't see Uranus. We call it Uranus now. But in modern times, with our telescopes, we now say, oh, there's another planet out there called Neptune and Uranus and Pluto. And then we're like, oh, well, I guess Pluto's not a planet. But they're not visible to the eye. So they weren't included in the 7 planets. So we come along, we say, well, in the ancient wisdom, Uranus was heaven, it's way out there. So we'll just call this next one Uranus. That's appropriate because Uranus is the father on Nibiru. And Nibiru is the planet that circles around Sirius. And actually our solar system is just circling around Sirius. And so, as we go around Sirius, and as Sirius goes around, we're a binary. It makes a figure 8. And this is the path of our sun. It goes around, comes back in 24 or 25,000 years. And so when we get closer to Sirius, the energy of that sun, their sun, which is 10 times brighter than our sun, imagine what that would be like. The golden age. When we get near Sirius is the golden age. When we get Nibiru. When we get near Nibiru. Now, there's another cycle of 3,600 years, but that's the cycle of Nibiru going around Sirius. So, when Nibiru comes around and is closer to the Earth, that's a 3,600 year cycle. So there's lots of different cycles. When we go around Sirius, it takes 25,000 years. And this is what Daniel's talking about when it says 7 times 70 weeks. This is a cycle. There's 7 days in a week, and it represents a cycle of time, a perfect cycle. And then you rest on the Sabbath, and that's the finishing of a cycle. So 70 times 7 is the entire cycle of the larger year that it takes the Earth to go around. And during that time, the Earth wobbles because it's being influenced by Sirius, and it causes that wobble. And that wobble takes 25,000 years to wobble. And so it changes the way we see the sky in 25,000 years. And the signs retrograde, you see, every 2,000 years. But what's really happening is we're traveling around Sirius. And as we do that, it makes the Earth wobble because of the gravitational pull of Sirius. And because of the wobble, we see the stars that are around us and Sirius. We see them change and retrograde. So the course that we're on is the path of the serpent. And so if you were to look at the Earth and flatten it out so you can see both sides, right? The front and the back. You got 2 circles. You'll see that we don't go around, the zodiac doesn't go around perfectly straight because of that wobble. But it goes around because of the wobble. See, every 25,000 years it makes this full wobble. So what's going to happen is we're going to go up, and then we're going to go down and up, and we're going to make the serpent path. And the path of the serpent is the path of the stars and the sun on their course around Sirius. And so, as it goes through the signs, the 12 signs, these are all the ancient myths. Helios, or El, the father of the gods, the 7 archons, or archetypes, the 7 planets that rule over 1 or 2, some of them will rule over 2 of the 12 signs of the zodiac. So there are these 7 gods that rule, and the chief of the Elohim is El, or Helios, that is sometimes called Eos. When is it called Eos? When do you see that great sun with the I-E-S that's behind Jesus' head? Jesus is the Eos. Well, he's the resurrected son. So in the Old Testament, Jesus was El. You say, well, Jesus is not the father of the gods. The New Testament says that all things came into being through Jesus, whether it be things on earth or things in heaven. It's talking about the things in our heaven. Because remember, there's different heavens. There's the third heaven, there's second heaven, the first. So there's different heavens. But in our heaven, in our earth, Jesus is the ruler. He's the father of these 7. He is the archangel, or the one who rules over the archons. And so, then you have lesser deities. And all of us are part of the plural Elohim. We're all sons of the El. But when that El goes through the sky and reaches Libra, which is the scales or the even, to even it out, it goes into evening. It drops down into hell. And at the bottom of that chart, you've got Saturn that rules over that. That's the devil. He's one of the gods. So, contrary to what people believe or think, Jesus then might be the brother of Satan, as Jehovah's Witnesses and a lot of the occult thinks. But not exactly, because Jesus is the son. And Saturn is much less significant than the sun. Jesus is the sun. And all life and energy and everything that's made in this world comes through Jesus. But he's no longer Helios, because it goes down around through the bottom 6 astrological chart, and then it gets back to Aries again. And at the Passover, it passes over, see, and there's a cross there, a crossing. And this is the spring equinox on March 21st. And on March 21st, Jesus is reborn. The Son is reborn or resurrected. See, the Son is reborn on December 21st. That's when the Sun has finished its downward path and begins to move back up. So he begins his resurrection, or he begins his life. Jesus began his life on December 21st. But he came up out of hell and died at the end of March, 1st of April, on the Passover. And he passed over that great cross, and he was impaled. And that 3 days and 3 nights that it took him to go from December 21st, see, January, February, and March, there's 3 signs, there's 3 days cycles that he has to go through in hell before he's resurrected on the 21st of March in Aries. And so that's the lamb that willingly came and died for you. And so you see how Helios, the sun, becomes Eos, the risen sun. And or soul, right? Sol, the sun's soul, becomes Eos, the Christ. But Uranus is the father of the gods. He is on Nibiru. And of course, he has a father as well, which is the galactic father. And he doesn't have a name. Because if you knew his name, if you chose a name for him, it wouldn't be him. Because he's everything. See, you can't name him. You can't say it's this or that. He's always the fire. Water puts out fire. Fire's not almighty. Well, then he's water. Fire will boil the water away. So, which is greater? Paper, scissors, rock. I mean, there's nothing in the universe that's greater than our Father. So everything in the Bible is going to be patterned after these symbols and signs in astrology, because they're telling you the story of the great universe in your soul and the Christ that's born into this world. And it happens over and over again in cycles. And as above, so below. It happens over and over again on small cycles. But ultimately, the great larger cycle is the great golden age that we're going to go through, that's going to last thousands of years. We've already been going through the dark ages for thousands of years. So now we're going to be going into the kingdom of our Father. See, once you go up in the resurrection, you go up into Aries, and that's the year of the ewing of the lambs, or the lambs start putting on the wool, and that wool represents the blossoms. And then you go into Taurus, which is when you go and get your bull and you put the bit on him and you make your grain, you start plowing the earth, and it starts to turn green. You go through Gemini, the twins, and the lambs start birthing, and they give twin goats. But then you go into Leo, who rules the heat and the hottest period in our summer is ruled by Leo, and that roaring lion who's royal and reigns over the world and makes everything grow, the great king. As it goes down, and it gets to Libra at the balance. See, then it goes down into hell. And it enters its descent and the emotional side, the dark side of the cycle. And we go down through this trouble, and we're laboring in Egypt. And the Pharaoh, the wicked Pharaoh who doesn't know Joseph, is ruling over us. And that's Satan, Saturn. And Saturn rules over this part down here. And then, of course, we come out to Aries again, and we're resurrected. And so, there's always this period of going through the Red Sea. The Red Sea is